And sort of like you have to be given a little time. I mean, people are protesting. If Hillary had won, and if my people went out and protested, everybody would say, oh, that's a terrible thing. And it would have been a much different attitude. There is a different attitude. You know, there's a double standard here.
Joining us right now is the communications director of the Trump presidential transition team, Jason Miller. Jason, good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Is there a double standard, you think? Congratulations, first off.
Thank you.
Good for you. Double standard?
Well, absolutely. I think if you saw conservative protesters or Republican protesters, it'd be a completely different story. But I think what the important takeaway here is that President-elect Trump is doing exactly what he said he would do, which is come out and focus on jobs, about securing our border, about repealing and replacing Obamacare. And he's looking so presidential in doing it. It shows he is up to the task for this job, and he's going to be a unifying figure.
You know, these people really outrage me. I mean, what are you doing? The election is over. I blame partly leadership like Harry Reid and those people who are supposed to show strength and confidence to make sure everybody else understands that we have to come together. Here is Harry Reid's quote. I've personally been on the ballot in Nevada for 26 elections. I've never seen anything like the reaction to the election completed last Tuesday. The election of Donald Trump has emboldened the forces of hate and bigotry in America. Really? Do you not know what just happened? Even Senator Manchin is just trying to distance himself from Harry Reid. He says, Senator Harry Reid's statement today attacking President-elect Trump is wrong. It is an absolute embarrassment to the Senate as an institution, our Democratic Party, and the nation. I want to be very clear. He does not speak for me. Where's the leadership?
Well, the irony is one of the reasons that Donald Trump won is because of Harry Reid, because of a dysfunctional Washington and a loudmouth in D.C. who treated every Donald Trump supporter as a white supremacist. I mean, in this statement, one of the things he says, innocent Americans cry tears of fear because this does not feel like America, and it's white nationalists celebrating. That is why people united under Donald Trump, because that's how they have been treated by Democrats and liberals, not just for 8 years, for decades.
Right. Right. And Jason, what's your reaction to how Donald Trump reacted to it? He actually addressed this last night in the 60 Minutes interview. Watch this.
Do you want to say anything to those people?
I would say don't do it. That's terrible, because I'm going to bring this country together.
They're harassing Latinos, Muslims.
I am so saddened to hear that, and I say stop it. If it helps, I will say this, and I'll say it right to the camera, stop it.
Do you see this as a major issue for the campaign going forward? How do you deal with this, Jason?
Well, I think we deal with it the exact same way that the president-elect has been with it, which is come out and be a unifying figure and make clear what his focus is, which is to help create an economy that helps all Americans. And I think you've seen coming out of the gate that he's been very specific with what he wants to do. He wants to make sure on day one we have a vote to repeal and replace Obamacare. He's coming out with a very specific plan, and he's doing exactly what he laid out at the address that he had at Gettysburg with here's what our first 100 days will do. He's already building a very unifying, uniting team at the top with his leadership structure within the White House. And for anyone who's a supporter or a fan of Mr. Trump's during the election, this is exactly what we saw the entire time. And I think that's what's making the left so upset, is that they can't play this dividing game. As a country, over the past 8 years, we've gotten too divided. We need someone to bring us together. That's exactly what the president-elect is doing.
The media deserves a lot of credit for this really dangerous environment, too. It's not just Harry Reid. Yeah. It's not just the Democratic leadership. It's the media.
You're right.
Because they have not done their jobs properly covering the Trump phenomenon. There's a reason that the Midwest flipped for Trump. There's a reason that Democratic strongholds like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin flipped for Trump. It's because these voters have been forgotten by the Democratic establishment for decades. There are counties that voted for Obama twice that flipped for Trump. Well, this is a big change, and it comes down to economics, not race.
I think you're skipping around the point that I don't think voters were forgotten. I think voters were going against the kleptocrats, the Clintons, right? I think they were seeing that they were running for the benefit of themselves and not the country. They've done it for 30 years. I think this was a vote as much of against Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump. Yeah. So I think the Democrats need to recognize that they can't run this country for themselves.
It was everything. I agree. It was a pushback. It was a repudiation against the media because they were not telling the truth. They were not even covering the criminality that was out there. Correct. It was also a repudiation against President Obama's executive orders.
Yes.
They said no, enough.
But I'd also say the important point here, too, is that the like Trump gave voters somebody to be for, gave them something to be for during the election. The other side of the campaign down the home stretch had no message, wasn't pushing anything positive. And when voters went into the booth, they had someone with the president-elect that they could vote for. And we're seeing this with this agenda, as you were talking about, these bad trade deals that are hurting American workers. Talk about Obamacare and the premium letters that people are getting in the mail. This is what the president-elect is going to come out and deal with exactly on day one.
Yeah.
And again, this is what's making the left so upset, is they're seeing how well he's doing in putting everything together.
You're right.
But President unprecedented power for the chief executive of the country through those very executive orders and those rules. And I think that some people who voted for Trump expect him to not rule by fiat in the way. And that is one concern, is that he works with the Congress in pushing his agenda rather than kind of taking it on himself and making those kind of executive decisions.
He's not going to try to be king, right? Like President Obama did. I know that's where you're going.
Well, and you see it with the team he's putting together, with Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, with Chief Strategist and Senior Counselor Steve Bannon. This is a team that has both the vision and the relationships and skills to implement what Mr. Trump wants to do. And I think that's, you see this already in what he's putting together. It's the temperament and the judgment that we need as president.
We know one thing covering business, though, that co-anything never works. So co-chief operating officers.
Right.
Is that really, is that the hierarchy? Are they on a level playing field?
Is there a hierarchy? He said that they were equal, but how's that going to work? Are they going to be competing?
Well, let's make it clear that President-elect Trump is the boss, and he's the one who the voters voted for, and he'll be laying down the vision.
That's why I didn't say CEO. I said chief operating officer.
Yeah, that's right.
But this is the exact same team that was so successful during the election, and the fact that it'll end up being north of 300 electoral votes that Mr. Trump up getting when they're done finally counting. And this is very impressive. This team has worked very well so far, and they work very well together in the White House.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you can see that the Democrats got the lowest amount of delegates they have had in 28 years, and that speaks to not only their policies, but also the candidate they put up for their party.
Wow.
And that speaks everything you need to know about that, regardless if she gets the popular vote.
Well, and the other important point, too, is the fact that we're only one legislature away from being able to pass some of these constitutional amendments, as we see the positive impact that Mr. Trump has had in Kentucky, for example, where they're able to flip the state house, and so we can start getting some real governing done. We can pass some tax cuts. We can do things like Obamacare. These are some powerful things. We'll need help at the state level, and we'll be able to get that done now.
And you think you'll get that done in 2017? Tax reform and Obama replacing and repeal.
Mr. Trump has said he's going to come right out with Obamacare, repealing and replacing it, with taking on the tax code so we can go and get our economy going, and jobs, 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 as he always talks about. And we have to get out there and secure the border.
But not replacing it in its entirety, because he did come out and say he's looking at keeping certain things. The exchanges that were made due to the Affordable Care Act.
Well, and that's what Mr. Trump will be laying out, a very specific plan to go and do that. He'll want to have a vote right when he gets in, and already we're working with our Hill allies to get that put together, and I think they're ready for it. And that's the thing, we'll have great relationships with both the House and the Senate, and get that done right away.
Jason, before you go, real quick, when are we going to find out the rest of the cabinet, like a Rudy Giuliani becoming AG? When are those announcements coming?
Good work there. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the mayor's, having worked on his 2008 presidential campaign. I think you'll start to see all that come together very soon. We got
this week?
Very soon. I think you saw many of the important pieces start to come together with the announcement yesterday with Bannon and Priebus. I think you'll see the rest coming along. But here's the one thing about Mr. Trump, is he's going to surround himself with the absolute best people. It'll be a broad team. It'll be a diverse team. It'll be leaders who are ready to take on this challenge and get the country going again.
All right.
Yeah. What a contrast the first 3 months of the Trump administration are going to be to the last 8 years, where nothing has basically gotten done.
Right. Nothing has gotten done.
They have the mandate, and I think the wherewithal to ramrod a lot of this through.
Yeah. And when you said delegates, it brought me back to when the beginning of the campaign, remember, everybody was like, oh, how come she has all these super delegates? Right. And we were all thinking that all these delegates were going to go for Clinton. And then you just said we had the leading number of delegates. That's pretty impressive.
And that's a testament to what Reince Priebus did in the last 8 years in terms of building up those Republican voters in some traditionally Democratic states.
Governorships, House, Senate, presidency, all four.
And an incredible campaign. Jason,